How's it going, guys? Welcome back to Untold Ireland. Now, we said we'd be posting them every 2 weeks, but some stuff happened, and now we're posting them one a week. So, you know, more untold, just more for you to enjoy. Today we have the lovely Miss McGearailt with us. We're recording the intro in Rogers again because, you know, you don't want to be pulling out a camera and just filming her entire house. But yeah, let us know how you felt about the interview when you've watched it all down in the comments, and I'll see you later, guys.
How are you doing, Jean? Would you just like to say your name and where you were from and where you grew up?
Alright, my name is Jean McGearailt. I was born in Claremorris, County Mayo, and I lived in different counties. My father moved a bit, and then I married Jean McGearailt in 1969, and we were in Mullingar, and then he was in the forestry, so they moved in that department. They used to move a good bit. They had to in early days, and then that changed. It was by choice they moved, but we moved from Offaly to here.
And what was it like growing up, kind of moving all around the place?
Do you know, I didn't, looking back on it, I think I was a bit of a rolling stone. You gather no moss, but that isn't totally true either. I made friends in different places and had new experiences in the different places. And like just the family went, so I didn't pay much heed. I've made friends easily enough when I moved. It didn't bother me too much.
And would you have any funny stories about any shenanigans that went on when you were moving around the place, kind of what it was like going to different schools? Or
well, you see, the thing is, my father was the principal teacher. They were all small schools, so that I suppose I felt a bit at home in those schools too, because it wasn't a huge thing. I wasn't going into a strange, where there was all strangers. But one of the schools I was in was a one-teacher school, or not a one-teacher school, a one-roomed school. So the two teachers were in their one room. There was a new school being built at the time. That was in Meath, Barstown in Meath. There was a new school being built. It wasn't quite finished when we went there. So we were all in the one room, and that was the way it had been there for a long time. And the junior teacher was at one end and the senior teacher at the other, and the children, they faced each other, and the children, we all had our backs to each other. We adapted to it very quickly. It mustn't have been easy for them, but it worked. But then there was great excitement when we got into the new school. And we had an extra classroom in that. There was 3 classrooms and we only needed 2. And so it was a big change.
would you say there was much of a difference in the standard of teaching when you moved into the 2 classrooms?
No. It was the same thing, same teacher, same thing. I don't know how they managed it, but they did. You know, you weren't aware of the others. And even the others speaking, I don't remember being distracted by it. They were used to handling it, I suppose. But it must have been much easier for them. Yeah.
And where did you end up doing your leaving cert then?
In Meath, in Mercy Convent in Navan. And that's where my father finally settled. So I liked that school. We were lucky. There were nuns that taught us and lay people, but they were open-minded. They were a bit ahead of their time, I think. Yeah. And they were interested in drama and music and all that. Of course, I was interested in that too, because my father was very interested in it, and my mother, and I just slotted into that. Everywhere I went, I slotted into that.
And you were telling us before we started the interview as well that your father and your mother would have done a lot of the drama in the schools that you were at. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, it was, they did. My father was very interested in drama, and he gathered the young people in the neighbourhood, and the winter nights we spent practising plays. And then he wasn't a great singer, so he used to bring my mother into the school. She was musical, to teach singing in the school, and she started a choir. And so he put on the play, and she would bring the singing part of it. And we, as children, used to go, and we loved that, to sing, and we'd all dress in black and white. And the evening before, or just before the show, we'd gather in the school, and one of the neighbours were there, and we'd have tea and bread and jam. And it was really very interesting. I remember one of the plays he did was The Paddy Pedlar. It was by a playwright called M.J. Malloy, and he lived in Milltown in County Galway, which wasn't too far from where we lived. We were on the Galway-Roscommon border at that stage. And I remember visiting him in the house, and I just remember seeing him, you know, childhood memories, they're flashes I have of memories, but anyway, he did a play by him called The Paddy Pedlar, and it was based on old folk tales, and it was about an old peddler whose mother had died, and he was bringing her on his back in a bag to his home place to bury her, and it was a one-act play. And he came into this man's house, I think Ushla was the man's name, and while he was there, Ushla used to help poor people like that, but he'd also see he had the anything he could steal. So when he put his hand into it, the Paddy Pedlar's bag, he got an awful fright because he found the mother in the bag. But my father was so intent on doing things right, he got a person to design a piece of a woman half up with grey hair and a bun, and it was kept in one of the rooms in our house, and we were quite scared of it at the time. But that was one of the things he did, and then the singing, we loved that as well. And then she progressed then from the school to the church, and she started the church choir, and that choir is going today.
Lovely.
Yeah.
In our last interview, we were speaking to Mr. Power,
Yeah.
and the two of us spent some time talking about how drama is super important for young people, just to kind of get better at speaking in public places, and it kind of helps people come out of their shell. Would you say that it would have helped you come out of your shell in any way?
It did, in a big way. It helped us in later life if you had to talk in public, really, that or anything like that. And I remember one time, to add to the programme, they brought people from, I think it was at Lone, they were singers anyway, and they brought them to add to the programme. And there was one man there, as a child I noticed it, but I've never got to understand how it happened. He had a very bad speech impediment, one of the men who came to sing, but when he sang, it was perfect. Perfect, yeah. So it helped him, I'm sure, too. Now, I don't know how he managed later on, but as a child I noticed that, and when he spoke, sometimes he'd sing his words rather than say them, yeah. But it did help us, and it was beautiful. It introduced us to literature and introduced us into music. We did a lot of the old Irish songs and Irish ballads. That was kind of our repertoire, if you'd call it that. It was very, very important. And it kept, as I said, everywhere I went I slotted into it. Even when I came here, it's 50 years ago this month, when I came to Kinmare, I joined the drama group and I was part of the church choir. So it brought me everywhere. When I was in college, we were boarders in our training college. I was a teacher in the training college in Dublin. We were boarders, so we had very little to do. And there were no mobile phones or anything like that then. We did get to see television once for the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah.
There was good interest in that at the time. But there again, I slotted in. There was a pageant on for the 1966, 50 years after the Easter Rising, and I was in that as well, so I suppose that's kind of, even though I moved a lot, I always fitted in to a certain group of people and got to know people that way.
And just talk about TVs there. What was it like when you got a TV for the first time?
I don't remember when we got it first, because when we lived in Meath, we had a TV. In my memory, I don't actually remember it coming into the house, because we used to pick up BBC and some of the programmes from England, and the reception, looking back, was very poor. It was black and white, and it was what we called snowy, but we enjoyed it. And my brother in particular, one of them, was very interested in soccer, all sport, but soccer at the time. And I remember him watching Georgie Best running up and down the field and his hair flying, and the snowy bad reception. That's one of my big memories. But then I do remember the night Television opened, and that was a big night, that we were going to our own station, one station. And everybody didn't have a TV, and one of my neighbours, he was an elderly man at the time, and he was from Dublin, and he would have lived through the Easter Rising and through the Civil War, but he had moved to our village, and he came to our house to watch the opening of Telefish Éireann, as it was called then. And I remember President De Valera he was our president at the time, Eamon De Valera, and Joe was the man's name that came, and I was watching him more than the opening of the TV, and he was crying when he heard Eamon De Valera opening. our own television station. The man was in tears. I was very taken by that. Yeah, it meant so much to him. Yes, I suppose this was another step in the development of our country. Yeah. So it's so different now today with all our channels. And then we have it all on our phone. We carry it around in our pocket now.
Yeah.
You really can't carry television in your pocket.
It is a very big difference.
Oh, there's no comparison.
Yeah.
It's totally different. Yeah. But we did love the television and there were programmes. And by coincidence, a few nights ago I came across a very old programme. And it was Andy Stewart and the White Heather Club. And I remember that was very popular in our house. It was a Scottish programme. It's black and white, but it was all, I was watching how they did it and how they produced it. It was all in the one spot, but it was very fast and very quick, and they'd sing songs and they'd do some Scottish dances. And Andy Stewart himself was a brilliant singer. That was before we got the television. I remember that programme, yeah. And another thing I remember, and you might find this amusing, as I said, we always had a radio.
Yeah.
And we listened to plays and we listened to children's programmes. But one programme we were left up to at night to listen to, and it was about 8 o'clock, and it was called Take the Floor by Dinjo. I forget Dinjo's second surname. And it was all Irish music and song and storytelling. And he had a dancer on, Rory O'Connor. And then now Rory would dance a hornpipe, and we were sitting listening to the radio, and you could hear Rory tapping out the rhythm of the hornpipe, and we could, in our imagination, we could see him dancing. But I often think that was, we never thought it was unusual.
Yeah.
We could see it in our mind's eye, we could see him dancing. I always imagined him with a kilt and all dressed up. I don't know what the man had on. So.
What would have been the first job you worked, or would you have gone straight into teaching?
Yeah, I went straight into teaching, yeah.
So what was it like being an aspiring teacher?
I was full of idealism anyway. Going to help children, because I like children. Yeah. And then I suppose my father was a teacher, and it was always, then I had the drama again, and I had the singing, and I had some of the things you need to be a teacher. So my first job was in Wicklow, and an interesting thing was, it was in Ashford in Wicklow, and in later years my grandsons went to that school, which
Lovely.
I thought was unusual, yeah. But I started off there. There were 4 teachers in that school, so I just had the junior side of the school. And I just settled in quick enough, I'd say, but then there was a lot of intention around it too, because when we began our first year, we would have an exam at the end of the year, our first diploma, and it was practical exam. The inspector would come, and the inspectors were pretty severe, some of them that time, some of them weren't. And you didn't know who was going to come, really. And then our second year, we did our final diploma and our second diploma. So we were at really a 2-year apprenticeship. So that you were always aware of that, so we were doing your very best to do things right, and it was a matter of experimenting. One thing that happened to me, and it wasn't in that first job, it was probably my second job, that time there was nothing for children, we'd say resources like blocks and all the different things they have in schools today, books, even more short supply, extra books and all that kind of thing. But teachers were very creative, and we made posters and we collected cake boxes and tins and clothes pegs and spools, the reels for the thread, empty reels of thread, all sorts of things. And you use them to play shop or to count, you use them for anything. The tops of bottles for counting, and they had the little blackboards with the chalk to write on. That's what the children were writing on, I remember. But one particular time, I remember I had a lot of cake boxes and different things in a press. And for whatever I was going to use them for the day, I opened the press and I saw a mouse in the press. Of course, I scared a mouse, but I said, no, there's children here, I have to pretend I'm calm. So I closed the press and I said, well, we won't be using those things today. And one little fella copped it, and up he went to the press to open it to see what was in them. He knew by my face I wasn't able to cover it. He took it up like that. Oh, I'll never forget it. chair, but I nearly did.
Would you have any more funny stories like that from your teaching days?
I can't remember now at the moment off the top of my head. There were lots of things happened. And there were more nice things than funny things. There were a lot of funny things, but I forget them, and we often said we should write these things down. I did. I don't know, at this moment I can't remember them. Tomorrow I might think one.
And how long would you have been a teacher then?
I suppose I did, in total I did about nearly 17 years. But I kind of took a break in the middle of that time when my children were small. So I stayed out of teaching for a good few years, but over those years I did go into schools a lot as a substitute teacher when it suited me, depending on what was happening or what stage the children were at the time. So I did. So I kept my hand in.
Yeah. But would you have missed being at it full time, or was?
No, I didn't miss it because I was so busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was glad to be able to keep my hand in by doing substitute work every so often.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I learned a lot through that. Because the children would always tell you, well, our teacher does this and our teacher does that. So I was always learning from what they told me their teachers did, and it was a very valuable experience. Yeah.
Moving on from that now, do you believe that the Ireland you grew up in shaped you as a person? Like, would you say now, moving around the country and experiencing different things, meeting different people, then becoming a teacher as well and interacting with so many different students and, you know, their parents and all that stuff, would you say that's kind of shaped you as a person and you've learned from all that?
Oh, definitely I have, yes. I have learned from that. Because every encounter you have with anybody, it does, if you're open to that engagement, say you learn something. So I did, yeah, it would shape.
You said that you settled in Meath after moving around the place where your father eventually settled. What was it like growing up in Meath then, the last couple of years?
I liked it. It was nice there. Yeah, and it was very near the city. We were 15 miles from Dublin. My father had a little Morris Minor car, so we went in and out to Dublin often to do shopping, and you could drive into Dublin that time and park anywhere on O'Connell Street. And I remember one time, it was the time of the patrician year, 64 maybe, I forget now which exactly, I always get mixed up what exact year it was. But there, it was 100, I think it was 1500 years since St. Patrick came to Ireland, and there was a big celebration. It was called the Patrician Year. And a cardinal came over from Rome, Cardinal Agrigenian, and there was a huge countrywide celebration of this. And I remember being with my friend at Slane, the Hill Slane, he said Mass there. I remember that was a big occasion. But my father was a gardener, and I remember that one evening he was up in the garden working away, and he came in and he said he was going to go in to see what was going on in Dublin, because Cardinal Agrigenian was going to be in Ars and Luther meeting the president. So we headed off from the Morris Minor anyway, into Dublin, into the Phoenix Park, and parked outside. We didn't see much, but next thing the car started moving, and my father began to move, and before we knew it, we were in the procession to the Pro Cathedral. But all this security was so different then, wasn't it? He went out Parkgate Street Gate and headed up the quays, and we were in the procession with all these dignitaries going up to the Pro Cathedral, and the people were every side of the street waving at us. And he couldn't get out of it. There was no way he could get out, and we were right up in O'Connell Street, and they turned off to the left to go up that way. I think it's up to Marlborough Street, up to the Pro Cathedral, and my father kept going on. But he enjoyed it, the back of it all, he didn't, but it was an experience.
Yeah.
So we used to go into the cinema in Dublin. That was another thing because of the drama. I suppose we used to go to the cinema as well, and shopping in Dublin. But, you know, it was just so easy to go in there now, and O'Connell Street is a very vibrant, lovely area. So I think they're talking about it needs to be rejuvenated now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's very interesting to hear, because Dublin is so different from that now.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I remember I drove up to Dublin the last day, and it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Just trying to find parking or anything. You
yeah.
can't do it, like, so
That's
what I
right.
ended up doing is I just drove back to the Red Cow when I left the car there for 2 days.
And went in on the loose.
And I went in on the Lewis, yeah.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's kind of the way it is now. They kind of want you to use the Lewis, the buses, all that.
Yeah, they do,
Yeah.
yes. But it was different. Like, there was less people. It was quieter time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s. And another thing that happened when I was in college, as I said, there was a little bit of revolt in my year, and we asked for weekends off. And all our parents were written to, and eventually we got the weekends off. But before that, you had to be in on a Sunday evening, regardless of the weekends actually, at 5 to 9, and it couldn't be 2 minutes to 9. You had to be back in college at 5 to 9. And one particular Sunday, there were a lot of people late, and what was the reason? The farmers had gone on a protest to Dublin, and this was in the late 60s, and there were tractors had come into the city, and people couldn't get back. The buses were blocked, everything was blocked, but there wasn't much understanding. We should have known beforehand that this was going to happen. Yeah, and another thing I remember now, just coming back to me, when I was in college, I had a cousin who lived in Booterstown, and he came, he was my father's cousin actually, to collect me. It was on one of this, either the Saturday or the Sunday, but he brought me into O'Connell Street. It was the day after Nelson's Pillar was blown up, so I could see it, and I remember standing there looking at the rubble and seeing Nelson's Pillar gone. And that was a place I always had an ambition to climb, and you could go up there for 6 months. And one day I was quite young, and I was in the city with my mother and my brother, and he arrived. I don't know where my brother disappeared to. I didn't know where he disappeared to. And he came back and he said he'd gone up the top of Nelson's Pillar. And I was so annoyed with him that he hadn't told me he was going, but obviously he didn't want the bother of his young sister going up Nelson's Pillar. I never got there, and I did see it in rubble. Yeah. Well, we went on our honeymoon to the north of Ireland in July 1969. And you could feel the tension. The troubles broke. And we were on the walls of Derry with lovely photos. I have photos of that, looking down. And I remember there were 2 people on the street talking, and you could just sense there was something wrong. So we headed back to Mullingar, that's where we were living, and we were in an apartment, and there was an apartment above us. And we had no television, we had a radio, all that. But all day long their television was going, and the troubles had broken out in the north at that time. And so that's my memory of the beginning of that era, hearing it on someone else's, through the ceiling of someone else's television, and it was on the radio, yeah. So, and we went back for our 25th anniversary up there. It was still, the peace agreement hadn't happened, even at that stage. But shortly afterwards it did. Yeah, we were hearing, I remember coming, visiting my parents. We were in Mullingar, Kinnity and Offaly at the time, and we had been visiting them one January evening and coming home the cold, and it was the day that, what they call Bloody Sunday. And I remember seeing the television, it was Bishop Daly with the white hanky trying to bring an injured man to safety. You just didn't go, we wouldn't have gone to the north in those times, you know, and it was troublesome and bothersome. You hated watching it happening in your own country, and all the sad stories that came out of it. And we even stopped singing our Irish ballads at the time. Yeah. We did, yeah. And we had learnt so many of them. It was kind of, you know, the Wolf Tones would be great now at all those. For a while, we wouldn't sing them because we felt, you know, it wasn't a peaceful thing to do, you know, you just didn't want to.
And that's an awful way to feel then in your own country, in your own language as well, then, like. Yeah,
and I don't know why it was that we didn't do it. Was my family thought it was, you know, wasn't the right thing to do, or I don't know, but we didn't for a good few years. We did. Yeah, we kind of stayed clear of them. Great, was revived afterwards, yeah.
What was it like then after the peace treaty was signed?
I was here in this house that time, and I remember it was brilliant, it was great. At last, there was peace, and I remember John Hume was a great hero of mine at the time, but I know there were others that involved, but he was kind of maybe the face of it. There were others as well, equally involved in it. It was great to know that.
I'd say there was some massive piss up all over the country.
I can imagine that, yeah. I wasn't involved in any of that. I just at home was delighted. I remember we were preparing for a wedding here or something. There was something going on. It was occupying me. Yeah.
And
Seamus Malin is another name that comes to my mind now as well. At that time, yeah.
what would you say, this is another loaded question now, sorry, what would you say would be the most significant change in Irish culture and standard of living in your lifetime? Would you say it's the turning on of the power, or I don't know really?
There's been so many changes in my time, huge changes. And I do remember the turning of the power on of the power as well in my village. Now when I was born in the town and we did have electricity.
Yeah.
And then when my father moved to that school in Roscommon, Galway borders, there was no electricity. And I remember there was preparations for what they called the big switch on. And before that we had oil lamps and we had a tilly lamp. And in our house we didn't have candles because my parents were afraid of fire, so they had an oil lamp and you could carry it around or you could hang it up on the wall. And the tilly lamp was the other thing. But there was no electricity. You could, as I said, the radio was a battery radio, wet and dry batteries, whatever they were.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly, but they had to be replaced every so often. So the night of the big switch on, I remember being very disappointed again. Something like the Nelson Spiller episode later, because there was a party in this, we lived near the school next door, and there was a big party that night, and I would have been in and out when the preparations were going on, and I was saying this is going to be a great night, but when it came there was no children at the party, and I felt here I am next door to the party, and I wasn't there because I wanted to see just the parish priest that switched on the electricity, and I just wanted to see him switching. The big switch on was in my head.
Yeah.
I don't actually remember the light lighting. I don't remember anything. Only I'd love to have seen the big switch being switched on. But it was great then when we had that light. Yeah, that was great. And to have then you could get an electric radio, you get an electric iron. You know the irons before that that I remember were ones you'd heat on the fire, and then then you do so much, you'd have to clean, then you do so much ironing, and then you'd have to heat it again. Then the new modern one appeared where it was hollow and there was a brick the shape of an iron inside it, and that was put in the fire, and you put that into the iron and you ironed away, and in the meantime if you were lucky you had a second block heating the fire, and then you were able to change. So that kind of, you switched them out, and that improved things. But now you could have electric iron, you could have all those things, but the light was the big thing.
Yeah.
The electric light was the big thing. Yeah.
And what was it like, kind of living in the village then, just with no power?
It was what was the way I was. I was a child. I didn't notice the difference, because what you had, and
yeah,
we didn't think too much about what you hadn't, We kind of, that was the way it was, but we were looking forward to having electric light. Yeah, because the evenings were dark, and our winters, they were so dark, and it was great to have light in the evening for reading or whatever you wanted to do, playing snakes and ladders or drafts or whatever we did in the evening. Yeah.
One thing I noticed as well with your generation versus mine is ye all seem a lot more grateful for what ye have now, because it's so different to what ye had before.
Yeah.
What would you say would be the biggest difference between the younger generation and yours?
Well, there are huge differences. Now, I think people are the same no matter what. I'd say people, basically, we're all human beings with the same needs and wishes and fears and joys as everybody, no matter who you are or what generation you belong to. But the culture has changed, and culture does change. Attitudes and beliefs might be different, and they are different, really. That's a big change. Yeah. And I think social media has that was one of the biggest change. I remember thinking or hearing that, in the future, when you ring somebody on the phone, my phone, I still have a landline, it's out in the hall, it's up on the wall, and that you would be able to see the person phoning you and they'd see you, and I thought that was just space age stuff altogether. This never happened. And now I carry that around in my bag. I won't leave the house without it. And I have it in the phone, and then use access to information from all over the world instantly. And you know, so it's wonderful because you can learn so much from it, and it's great to have this communication, and I think social media is absolutely wonderful. I have this idea that I heard, first of all, it began medical people exchanging ideas.
Yeah.
And like, that's wonderful. And it is, I often hear at night, I can travel the world, sitting in this chair and I look at the television, and I can go to any country I want, and I find that's marvellous. Or go back into history, look at history programs. And if I want to see my son in California, just press the button, and I was talking to him yesterday, and all that's wonderful. But like everything else, it can take over your life.
Yeah.
Too much, and there's a lot of things. You have to be very discerning what's on it, because you can use it. There's a lot of people on YouTube, they have there, and social media, and there's no, you could say do what you like really. And there's an influence, you're getting influences from everywhere, and it's hard to know what's good, what's right, what's true, what's false.
Yeah.
And that's difficult for young people, I think. And to be able to sort that out, I think young people need a lot of guidance for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
See, it's the a big thing with it would be that a lot of the most famous people in kind of the eyes of the younger generation now, a lot of them could be considered, you know, for lack of a better word, scumbags and stuff like that they wouldn't really show a lot of people respect. So I think a huge problem with it is that these are the role models now to the younger generation, and they're running around the place acting the fool. So then what do? They run around the place and they act the fool.
Yeah.
And I was guilty of it myself when I was younger, because I would have grown up watching all these kind of people.
Yes.
And, you know, I ran around the place acting the fool.
Yes.
So I think there's huge benefits to it, but there's also flaws that you just simply cannot ignore.
We can't ignore it, no.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to hear you saying that, yeah, because that's what I think is there. And I do remember when the internet became kind of, when people were having, what do you call it, domestic, that's not the word, a computer in your house, and what do they call that? There's a word for that.
A PC, a personal computer.
Personal computer, yeah. When that started was, I remember watching a TV program one night, and there was a man from Japan being interviewed, and he was warning about this. He said, it's opened everything, every idea, everything.
Yeah.
He said, and that's a danger of this. And he was right. That there needs to be a lot of education around it for young people, but then it's nature of being young not to listen to what people tell you.
See,
they make mistakes, but the mistakes can be big.
Yeah.
You know, they're too big sometimes.
Especially online as well, where everything you put into the internet, I know I've been taught now since I was only small that everything you put on the internet does not go away. It doesn't disappear.
No, that's true.
It's, your digital footprint is permanent, and you know, when you're growing up, you don't really take how serious that actually is, and you just, you know, you'd say something stupid, or you might do something else that, you know, it's wrong, you can't do this.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing now for celebrities and all that as well, because stuff that would have been acceptable not even 10 years ago isn't acceptable anymore.
Yes.
So then they've said things
that's
not acceptable now, but they would have said this in a time frame that it was acceptable, and then whole career's gone.
Yeah,
Stuff
their
like
challenge,
that.
their career's gone. Yeah, that's true, and that's I've noticed that happening big time. And what was, as you say, socially acceptable to say is not today.
Yeah.
And people are getting into trouble for that, and young people, you can't put an old head on young shoulders. So I don't know, it's a big problem, I think, But at the same time, it has opened life, and our standard of living is wonderful compared to what it was in our day. Now, when to be satisfied is the other thing. How much do you need? Or where do you stop wanting more things? That's another thing, I suppose, that young people have to look at, maybe. It's hard to make those decisions when there's so much there.
Finishing up now,
Yeah.
Is there any aspect of Ireland from when you were younger that you'd like to preserve for the younger generation? Say the social aspect or anything like that.
Yeah, the fun we had together and playing games together, and even a big thing, of course, as I've spoken already, is coming together to put on plays with my father, and maybe in the choir. We were interacting with each other, and then communities as well, where neighbourhood was very important and community was very important. I'd love to preserve that. It's still alive in Ireland. You can see it at certain times it's more obvious than others.
Yeah.
But that's very important to preserve.
I'd say it's definitely a lot larger in kind of smaller villages.
In smaller areas and in the
stuff like
country
that.
than in the cities. That's where. Whereas before, I was talking to a lady who grew up in Dublin, and she told me Dublin has changed so much. She said she's my age when I was growing up. She said there were all these villages in the city. You know, there was Ranelagh, there was Rathmines, and there were actually little villages of their own, even though they were connected.
Their own little communities.
And she said there were little shops and people were placed there and they're all gone, she said. It's all changed.
See, Dublin these days is very grey, like, you know, just walking around.
Yeah, it is. It's disjointed, and you're not even supposed to make eye contact with people now if you walk in a city. You just keep going yourself, mind yourself, So it is, and I think I'd love to see Irish music, which is great. There has been a great revival in Irish music, and that is going to last, and it's developing. You know, there are people like Wrigley's, there's a family connection here. My husband was a cousin of theirs, but they're kind of innovative really in their Irish music, and others, and dance and all that. I'd love to see that preserved, and our Irishness, to be proud of being Irish. When we grew up, we thought Ireland was we were deluded a bit, or we thought Ireland was the best place in the whole world, this green island we lived in, and we didn't realise what beautiful things they had in other countries.
You weren't deluded at all. It's the best country in the world.
Well, it was in lots of ways, but we had very little compared to some place now. And I go back and see the architecture in other countries and what we missed out on here through all our years of, I suppose, suppression in a way you could call it. But I'd love. We need to preserve our music and our dance and our sense of community. And our faith was another thing we had. Now people have different spirituality today, but while the Catholic Church came under a lot of criticism, and a lot of it valid over the last number of years, I have this feeling, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the message is different to what's there, and it's only human beings who have been minding this message over the centuries. So don't throw out everything just because the messengers were faulty in times.
Mr. Power was actually saying something very similar yesterday, that he was, while you may not agree with certain things that happened and stuff like that,
don't agree with them.
The core teachings of what is Catholicism is just love thy neighbour and all that. Be nice to people, love yourself
and love your neighbour.
Be kind.
He's right. That's true.
So I think people are so quick to throw out, like you said, the whole thing, the baby with the bathwater. That even like you were saying there in the cities, that you wouldn't even say hello to people. You look at the wall, you look at the floor, you mind your business, all that kind of thing.
That's true. Because that's the way, I suppose. There's danger. You have to protect yourself too. You have to be sensible. And I think we were talking about social media, and social media there's noise. The world today is very noisy. It's hard to get a moment where it isn't noisy, because we turn the television on in the house, the radio is on, there's music on, there's the phone. People have their heads in their phone and their earphones in, and they're out in nature having a walk with their earphones in. And I think I can only say what I think it's important to me anyway, to go for a walk and look up at the hills and look at after the bad weather there, when I did venture out, there was beautiful. I was down there on the football field and the hills were covered in snow. It was absolutely beautiful. And the night sky to me is just awesome. And it's there all day, but you don't see it because it's so bright. But I think and just to look at nature and walk in nature and woods, and there's, of course, we're spoiled around here. We've waterfalls and mountains and rivers and sea, and if I'm looking at my phone all day, I can't see those things. Or if I'm walking. Sometimes I put in the earpods and go for a walk and I listen to a story, say. But then if I meet someone,
The trauma outlet.
yeah, I would. Yeah, because you can't talk to them, yeah. And then for quietness, it's important. I've got to love silence. There was an old, there has to be old sayings are true. Silence is golden, is an old saying. And it is, but you have to get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and silence and quiet and another place that's the quietest place of all, I suppose, that on an afternoon if you go into a church, and the peace that's in there and the quiet. And if you have a trouble or anything, just go in and sit and let the peace surround you, I think, yeah. And the Lord is there, and He's with us always and loves every one of us. So that's the way I live, or what has been important to me in my life, yeah.
And saying there about the AirPods as well, I think a lot of that is we are spoilt rotten with where we live. Like Kenmare, Kilgarvan is such a beautiful place to live.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we go for a walk, you can leave off the AirPods and you just listen to the birds.
Exactly.
And, you know, if it's a lovely day, you look up
Yeah.
and all that. I'd say why that's becoming so popular in the cities is because the cities, Dublin especially, the last time I was up there, I kind of noticed this. Granted, it was Christmas, so it was beautiful looking.
Oh yeah, the
But
lights.
You'd get sick of looking at the same grey buildings. Limerick is like this as well now, where the whole place is very grey.
Yes.
And you're not going to talk to anyone you meet.
No.
So anything like that. So why wouldn't you throw in the AirPods then?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yeah.
I think we are kind of, like I'd say, we are kind of like privileged in that way where.
We have, it's all around us and we don't.
Yeah.
Do you know, I stand at the door there often and look out, and outside there, every day of the year it's different. And it's beautiful. But you could forget that too, but it's good for your soul to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Final question now, finishing up. Is there any words of wisdom you would like to give to the younger generation coming up?
Well, I don't have a monopoly on wisdom. All I could say is what has helped me in my life. Yeah. And things I have learned. And I think we have to look after our health. So there's the physical, our mental and physical health, and our emotional health. It's very important to look after them. And that's what might involve sometimes getting professional help. Sometimes a good friend is enough to help you. And the physical thing, you do need help with that as well. If you're not sportive, someone to encourage you to do it, or to keep you at it if you've started it. And mental and emotional health, you might need to get professional help sometimes, but often all you need is a good friend. And pick your friends wisely is important. Friends that are there with you through thick and thin, and that you can be yourself with, and that are there to listen to your troubles and share your joys, which is equally as important. I think that's important in life. And there's a spiritual side of ourselves which we need to feed too. The soul has to be fed. We can do that with music, beautiful music, and as we mentioned already, looking at the beauties of nature and sitting in silence in nature, in your house or in the church, light a candle and say a few prayers, and to know that God is there with us always, and He's there for us.
Jean, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. You're very welcome. I enjoyed meeting both of you.
Right, so guys, I hope you enjoyed that now. I had a great time talking to Miss McGearailt. Obviously we're doing the outro here again in Rogers because, you know, I can't just be sitting in front of a camera in someone else's house. It doesn't feel right to me. But if you want to follow our social medias, we have an Instagram, an X, a TikTok, a Facebook, we have a Patreon that I also have. We have another video coming out in 2 weeks' time now, so book that date down, you know, get in there, you know, cheeky little Untolds, nothing wrong with it. Also, once again, if you want to get in contact with us and to do an interview or anything like that, just let us know. We'll see what we can make happen and, you know, be a good time. Thank you very much for watching, guys. See you in 2 weeks.